Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the muddy lanes and torchlit halls of medieval Europe to witness a wedding feast unlike anything you've ever imagined. The air is thick with wood smoke, sweat, and, is that goose fat? You squint into the crowd as villagers bang drums, ring bells, and scream like it's the world's most chaotic talent show. You're standing awkwardly behind a pair of barefoot children holding dead fish like bouquets. A man in cabbage-colored robes is honking on a ram's horn. The bride? She's just been slapped on the bottom with a live goose. Yes, really. You're not at a wedding reception. You're at a ritual, a deal, a village-wide explosion of food, fertility symbols, and loud, bizarre traditions. And you probably won't survive this, at least not without staining your tunic and your dignity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as the wedding procession clatters into the churchyard, if you can call it that. It's more like a big patch of mud with a wooden cross nailed to a tree. The bride is lifted, literally hoisted, onto a straw-covered cart, sitting beside a jug of ale and a squawking goose tied to the axle. That goose? It has a job. Local lore says the more it screams, the more fertile the bride will be. No one consulted the goose. Bells are clanging. Not the church kind, though. These are tiny iron bells tied to sticks and waved around by drunk children while they run in spirals, pretending to ward off evil spirits, or maybe just killing time until the bread comes out. You can't tell. Everyone's yelling, some folks are crying, happy tears, probably, and the groom? He's missing a shoe, grinning like it's a badge of honor. The noise isn't just for fun. Medieval communities believed that chaos, clamor, and racket could scare away mischievous spirits, who apparently were huge wedding crashers. No quiet moments, no touching speeches. Just a din so overwhelming even Satan himself might ask for an aspirin and leave. And then comes the roasting. No, not the meat yet, we'll get there. First, the public roasting of the bride. Women from the village take turns teasing her, poking her side, commenting loudly on her childbearing hips, and recounting tales of clumsy wedding nights. It's a performance, a blend of superstition and slapstick meant to humiliate just enough to bring good luck. It's believed the bride must be humbled before entering marriage, or else misfortune might follow. Feminist, it's not. One woman, missing most of her teeth, sings a rude limerick involving turnips and the groom's ears. You don't get it, but everyone laughs. The bride blushes. The groom awkwardly pretends he's heard it before. You pretend not to exist. Now it's your turn to enter the feast hall. Except, hall might be a stretch, it's more of a barn, maybe an abandoned granary, with tapestries flapping against the wind and half a goat carcass swinging from a wooden beam. You step over a dog sleeping on a wedding dress hem. A child offers you a mug of something warm and chunky. You decline. The child shrugs and drinks it himself. In the center of it all is the bride's throne, a makeshift platform covered in linens, animal pelts, and a pile of herbs that may or may not be hallucinogenic. She's placed there ceremonially and handed a single raw onion wrapped in lace. You wish you were making that up, but no, onions were symbols of fertility, and gifting one in lace meant her womb would remain properly perfumed. Historians still argue whether this was literal or simply symbolic, and whether the onion was later eaten, planted, or used to ward off her new in-laws. As night falls and the torches are lit, the goosing begins again. This time, it's metaphorical. Men from the groom's side, often drunk and uninvited, try to sneak up and pinch the bride, lightly, sometimes not so lightly, on the behind. It's supposed to bring luck. She's supposed to laugh. You, understandably, are horrified. The custom is called chivalry in some regions, and it gets rowdier the darker the sky. If the bride doesn't cry or throw something, it's a good omen. If she does, the marriage might be doomed. No pressure, sweetheart. Somewhere near the pig roast, a man begins juggling what looks like eggs but are probably small onions. Children clap. A goat urinates on someone's sandal. The drumming doesn't stop. The goose is now loose. You start to wonder, was all of this just for spectacle? Actually, no. Medieval feasts were deeply communal events. A wedding wasn't just a private affair, it was a bond between two families, often two clans, sometimes even two villages. Everyone had a stake in it. The louder the celebration, the greater the blessing. The stranger the ritual, the more protected the couple would be. And if that meant a few pinched rears and airborne onions, so be it. A man nearby begins carving patterns into a wheel of cheese. You ask why. He tells you it's a love spell. The cheese has names carved on its rind, and whoever gets the slice with their own name is supposedly next to marry. Someone shouts that your name is on one. You duck and crawl under a table, knocking over a jar of pickled plums. A woman laughs and calls you timid like a monk. You're not offended. Honestly, monks had it easy. As you inch away from the cheese, you spot the bride again. Her hair is being braided with rosemary and bits of old ribbon. Someone sprinkles flour into her lap. A cat is asleep on her veil. Through it all, she smiles. Because beneath the absurdity, the pranks, the shrieks and feathers and drum rolls, there's something genuinely celebratory here. Something ancient. Messy, yes. Loud, for sure. But oddly sincere. This village, this raucous bunch of onion throwers and rude song singers, they're trying to bless a new life. And if they have to goose someone to do it, well, that's tradition. You're still reeling from the last round of goose-based blessings when a hush suddenly falls over the feast barn. Well, not quite a hush. More like a respectful decrease in yelling. People make way as an older man with a limp, a fur hat, and a suspiciously large book limps toward the center of the room. He's the marriage broker, or matchmaker if you want to be generous. And he's about to officiate a ritual that feels less about love and more about livestock. You see, in medieval Europe, marriages were legal contracts first and romantic adventures second, or third, depending on how much ale was involved. The dowry is front and center now, like the headline act before the actual ceremony. The bride's family has hauled in their contribution, 2 goats, alive, 3 sacks of barley, a jug of something that might be mead, and a curious pig that keeps trying to climb onto the trestle table. The groom's family nods. They counteroffer. There's a quiet but tense discussion about whether one goat has a limp. People argue. The pig squeals. A man bites into barley to test its mood, whatever that means. You stand awkwardly beside the barrel of salted turnips, wondering if anyone else finds this bizarre. No one does. The matchmaker raises a hand and dramatically announces, the pig agrees. The crowd erupts in laughter, applause, and 3 simultaneous sneezes. And while you think this is all for show, it's not. That pig, believe it or not, serves a symbolic role. In some regions, animals were brought to witness the signing of wedding contracts, living proof, so to speak. After all, parchment could be lost or forged, but the squeal of a pig at the moment of agreement? Unforgettable. The bride's father hands over a ring, not for the finger, but for the ale cask. Another gesture. If the cask ring is tied to the dowry jug, it means the bride enters the marriage under shared family obligations. If not, she becomes part of the groom's household entirely. Historians still argue whether this practice genuinely empowered brides or simply changed who got to boss them around. The entire contract is read aloud. Loudly. Dramatically. The matchmaker mispronounces half of it but makes up for it with wild gesturing and theatrical sighs. Someone starts a slow clap. A dog joins in with a howl. You think you hear someone say, he did this at my cousin's wedding, too. You try not to laugh. Now that the dowry is agreed upon, it's time for the girdle binding. Don't worry, you won't have to wear anything. But the bride does. She's handed a ribbon, worn like a sash or a belt, and it's tied by her mother and the oldest woman in the village, who is possibly 130 years old and smells strongly of dill. The ribbon has knots in it, each representing a virtue: patience, obedience, loyalty, and, inexplicably, the good ear. You're not sure if that's metaphorical or if someone once married into a family of bards. The groom, meanwhile, is handed a sack of flour. He is to carry it, barefoot, across a wooden plank laid across a puddle. Symbolism? You bet. He's proving he can carry the family's weight and not fall into metaphorical mud. Except it's not metaphorical. It's real mud. And he nearly drops the sack. Everyone gasps. The pig squeals again. But he steadies himself, steps across, and earns a round of groans and reluctant applause. He bows like he just survived a jousting match. You find a bench beneath a hanging tapestry depicting two suspiciously muscular doves kissing beneath a tree. A young woman next to you leans in and whispers, "They did the flower thing at my sister's wedding." He fell in. Twice. You both snort and get shushed by an old man holding a spoon like a scepter. Now comes the dowry showcase. Everything the bride's family contributed is displayed like prizes at a medieval raffle. The goats, freshly combed, are led around. The barley is stacked. The jug is ceremonially opened and sniffed by no fewer than 5 grandmothers. There's murmuring. Approval. A few people spit into the fire for good luck. You're told not to ask why. And just when you think things are settling down, the honor dance begins. This is where it gets theatrical. The groom has to dance with each member of the bride's family, starting with her great-aunt, who is half-blind and twice as energetic as anyone else here. He lifts her by the elbows. She giggles. Someone plays a lute with 2 missing strings. You feel like you've wandered into a traveling circus but with more cabbage. One by one, the relatives dance, and with each turn, they press a coin or token into the groom's hand. These aren't gifts, they're debts. He now owes them favors: help with harvest, a winter coat, settling a fence dispute. Marriage wasn't just about 2 people, it was an economic, social, and political alliance. You're marrying a person, but you're also marrying into their land disputes, cheese feuds, and whose chicken stole whose grain. In one corner, a man tallies each favor token on a chalkboard. He's wearing a hat shaped like a rooster and does not break character. At last, the bride stands. The music shifts. And everyone quiets down. She walks, no, glides, across the dirt floor in her embroidered linen gown. It's not white. There's no veil. But it's beautiful. Earth-toned, patched in places, stitched with rosemary sprigs and small animal bones for protection. Yes, bones. Little ones, tied on like lucky charms. She kneels beside the dowry pig, places her hand on its back, and says a prayer. The pig farts. Everyone cheers. And there you have it. A moment both absurd and sacred. A binding contract sealed with food, ribbon, mud, dancing, and an extremely vocal pig. This isn't just a wedding. It's a public commitment, a spectacle of social positioning, and a rite that blends business with belief. You realize that in a world without lawyers, prenups, or hashtags, you needed ceremony, loud, muddy, and unforgettable ceremony, to make love official. The crowd surges like a tide as the dowry drama fades and the real feast begins. Or, well, the start of it. You haven't even touched food yet. First, there's a toast. The kind that doesn't end until half the guests have fallen off their stools and someone mistakes a turnip for a baby. You're handed a wooden mug, rough-edged and sticky with something golden and glistening inside. Mead. The medieval elixir. Honey wine so sweet it hurts your teeth and so strong it might erase your memory of how many people just danced with a pig. You sip. It burns in a pleasant, suspicious way. The first gulp is floral, then fire, then something herbal you hope isn't just leftover spoon. This isn't just the wedding drink. This is the reason behind the honeymoon. See, the term honeymoon comes from this very tradition. In medieval Europe, couples were often gifted a month's supply of mead to boost fertility and give them something to drink while hiding from their families. Mead was believed to increase virility and ensure a healthy, possibly chubby heir. You suspect it may have also been a subtle way to keep newlyweds too hungover to argue for 30 days. Historians still argue whether the honey-based ritual was an actual medicinal custom or a convenient excuse to disappear and drink behind a barn. Either way, you're halfway through your mug when a woman with one eyebrow and a drumstick necklace offers you more. The groom is now passed out upright against a barrel. A child pokes his cheek with a feather. No one intervenes. He's considered very lucky. Tables creak under the weight of food, most of it unfamiliar, and all of it aggressively seasoned. There's a spiced custard the consistency of swamp mud, a pie that pulses like it's breathing, and a stew that smells oddly like mint and boiled socks. You do what any polite guest would do, you nibble, smile, and discreetly feed it to a dog under the table. Next to you, a man in a fur cape is talking about marriage humors. Apparently, the body has 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and the union of 2 people must balance them. You stare into your mead and wonder if you're more phlegm than blood. He insists the groom is obviously too choleric. You nod solemnly, unsure if it's an insult or a compliment. Now a group of guests is yelling something about moon timing. You're confused until a woman begins chanting a rhyme about choosing wedding days based on lunar cycles. Full moon. Good for fertility. Waning moon. Best for couples who enjoy silence. New moon. Risky unless you bury a beetroot under the bed. Suddenly, a bucket is passed around, filled with what looks like glittering ice. You're told it's frozen mead, a rare treat. You realize it's just regular mead with frost from the cellar, but everyone oozes like it's dragon treasure. You take a bite. It numbs your teeth and possibly your childhood trauma. With drink flowing like a burst dam, the laughter grows louder, sloppier. It's time for the loudest toast. A tradition where guests must shout their blessings in the most absurd voice possible. You hear falsetto cackles, goat-like bleats, one woman mimicking a fish, and a man whose blessing voice sounds suspiciously like a haunted kettle. Your turn comes. You panic and shout, "May your cabbages always bloom twice." It makes no sense, but the crowd loves it. Someone claps you on the back hard enough to realign your spine. Another guest says, "That's an omen." You are now known, apparently, as the cabbage whisperer. Congratulations. The mead keeps coming. Some guests have switched to something darker and meaner, blackberry wine with a vinegar finish and a name that roughly translates to widowmaker's blessing. You decline. You like your kidneys intact. The bride, who earlier looked like she'd had just enough mead to glow with joy, now beams like a full-on lantern. Her cheeks are red, her laugh musical, and she's balancing an onion on her head while her cousin plays a jaw harp. You blink. You're not hallucinating. This is a competition. Whoever can dance with an onion balanced longest wins a silver button. Spoiler, the button probably isn't silver. You hear talk of an ancient ritual called mead mapping. In this custom, the newlyweds are supposed to walk barefoot around their village's outermost borders during their honeymoon, drinking mead and mapping their union by kissing at every marker. Some think it's symbolic. Others say it was just a sneaky way to turn wedding leave into a sightseeing trip. And then comes the drinking vow. A rarely attempted but crowd-pleasing bit where the bride and groom must say their vows again, but after each line, they take a shot of mead. I will honor thee, gulp. I will cherish thee, gulp. Even when thou dost snore like an ox, gulp. By the time the vows are done, they're wobbling like trees in a storm. Everyone cheers. You quietly hope there's a bucket nearby. The laughter rises. Somewhere, a rooster crows. Indoors. No one blinks. You think about modern weddings, matching napkins, Instagram filters, sober best men, and realize something. For all its muddy absurdity, this feast has a kind of raw joy. People aren't here for appearances. They're here to eat, drink, yell nonsense, and hope the couple survives marriage with at least one tooth and 2 goats between them. As the mead flows and the fire crackles, you sit back, mug in hand, letting the warmth soak into your bones. Someone puts a wreath of rosemary on your head. A child giggles and calls you the Cabbage King. You grin, dizzy and sticky, and for a moment, feel like maybe, just maybe, you belong here. You barely have time to adjust your rosemary crown before a shout pierces the thick air, "Bring out the blessing bread." You expect something modest, a loaf or 2, maybe adorned with herbs or a dainty etching of doves. Instead, what you get is a hardened loaf the size of a small pig, carried by 2 very nervous-looking boys, each wearing flower garlands and the expressions of people who have seen things. They hoist the loaf to the center of the hall and drop it with a thud that shakes the mugs. Everyone goes silent, and for a heartbeat you wonder if this is another fertility ritual involving baked goods. Spoiler, it absolutely is. This is the blessing bread or bridal cake, and it's no gentle pastry. It's designed to be hard. Unreasonably hard. So hard that it has to be broken, not sliced, not cut, by hand, and preferably with dramatic struggle. Why? Because the way it breaks is said to foretell the strength and shape of the couple's future. Tear a clean half. Equal partnership. Shatter it into crumbs. Chaotic household. Break it with your foot? You might as well sleep in the pigsty. The bride and groom step forward. Everyone leans in. The groom grabs one end, the bride the other. They pull. Nothing happens. The loaf holds. Tension rises. Someone whispers, "They're cursed." A dog sneezes. Finally, with a heroic groan, the bread cracks, perfectly down the middle. Cheers erupt. Old women wipe their eyes. One man faints from relief, though it may just be the blackberry wine. Now, the fun begins. The 2 halves are lifted high, and small chunks are torn off and thrown, yes, thrown, into the crowd. Guests scramble like it's the last crust of earth. A child dives into a barrel head first. A woman catches a chunk and instantly rubs it on her apron. Good luck, you're told. Especially for childbirth. You make a mental note never to wear that apron. A piece lands in your lap. It's dry as old bones and tastes like flour's ghost. But around you, people are weeping with joy as they bite into it. Bread was sacred. Symbolic. Full of superstition. In some areas, brides even wore crumbs in their shoes, said to protect from demons or from annoying mothers-in-law, depending on who you asked. In the corner, another loaf appears, this one sweetened and topped with herbs. It's the maid cake, reserved for unmarried women. They're invited to dance around it in a circle, singing about finding love, strong teeth, and a man who bathes. You're unsure which is rarer. Once the dancing ends, they each take a piece and place it under their pillow that night. Supposedly, it brings dreams of their future husband. Historians still argue whether this tradition actually influenced matchmaking, or just caused a lot of ant infestations. Then, the twist. There's a 3rd loaf. A tiny one. Burned on one side, sour on the other, and shaped like a wonky crescent moon. This is the misfortune loaf. Given to the person who didn't get an invite but showed up anyway, or the last person to catch a bread chunk. The unlucky one must hold it and recite a rhyme begging forgiveness from the feast. It's half shaming, half comedy. The rhyme goes something like, I was late, I was rude. I brought neither cheese nor food. Let this bread make me wise, and keep flies from my eyes. Guess who caught the last crumb? Yep. You. The crowd howls with delight as you're ushered forward, handed the burnt bread like it's a royal scroll, and encouraged to perform. You do your best, stumble over cheese, and add a dramatic bow. Laughter, applause, someone throws a turnip. You're officially part of the story now. But don't relax. The next event is the crumb chase. Remember the blessing bread? Every fallen crumb is now hunted by eager guests, especially the elderly, who believe storing one in a pouch near the heart ensures a year of peace, fertility, and, oddly, better dreams. One woman elbows a monk out of the way. A child eats 3 crumbs at once. You pretend to help someone up while discreetly pocketing a corner chunk. The bride sees and winks at you. You're in. Suddenly, the groom stands and raises what looks like a stale biscuit. This is the token toss. He throws it high into the air, and whichever unmarried man catches it is said to marry within the year. The men leap like startled deer. One flips a bench. A baker catches it and screams, finally. You feel like clapping, but the biscuit breaks in half and he starts crying. Mixed messages. Meanwhile, the bride has disappeared. But don't panic, it's part of the game. She's been hidden by her side of the family. Somewhere in the barn, hayloft, or even under a table, she's crouching quietly, wrapped in her veil, possibly giggling. It's now the groom's task to find her using only a single clue, a rhyme spoken by her youngest sibling. The clue goes, she sits where mice might dare not tread, beneath a roof, not quite a bed. He looks around, bewildered. Someone hands him a goose feather for luck. Another person blindfolds him. Why? Because it's funnier. You and the guests follow him as he stumbles, sniffs the air, and yells, beloved, into a barrel. After several wrong turns, including mistaking the pig for his bride, no comment, he finally lifts the corner of a hay bale and finds her curled like a mischievous dormouse. The crowd erupts. He kisses her cheek, she bites his nose affectionately, and a lute begins playing a victory jig. This was no simple hide-and-seek. It's called the finding, and it's symbolic of the groom's promise to always seek out his wife, protect her, and, most importantly, to laugh with her. You watch, smiling through the heat, the chaos, the crumbs in your sleeves. You've never seen love look like this before, muddy, ridiculous, awkward, and oddly beautiful. You haven't even recovered from the bread brawl when the air in the feast hall shifts. A hush falls over the crowd, not the tense silence of a ruined dowry negotiation or an insulted in-law, but the reverent anticipation that only one thing can inspire, the arrival of the feast centerpieces. No, not flowers. Not a fruit display. Birds. Specifically, an entire roasted peacock, feathers reassembled and shimmering with unnatural blues and greens, gliding forward like royalty on a silver tray. Behind it, a second dish, something vaguely bird-shaped but glowing gold and steaming in angry little huffs. You can't be sure, but you think it might be swan. Maybe dragon, if the cook had a flair for exaggeration. The noble's table cheers, and someone loudly recites a poem praising the bird with fire on its brow. You glance around, hoping someone else is confused. No one is. They're all enraptured. You learn that this is the subtlety, a term that sounds mild but refers to extravagant edible sculptures, usually sweet, often unsettling, and definitely show-off material. These peacocks are paraded like beauty queens before being served. Except, they're not for eating. Not really. These birds are so heavily decorated, so doused in spices, gold leaf, and boiled sugar, that they're almost purely ornamental. You're told that nobles would often keep the skin and feathers intact after cooking, then reassemble them around the meat so it looked alive on the platter. A kind of meaty taxidermy. In some cases, the birds weren't even cooked. Just dressed up and displayed like edible art. One woman leans in and whispers, once they brought out a whole tower made of marzipan. Crashed on a drunk knight's head. You make a note to be nowhere near any marzipan architecture tonight. The cooks arrive with something even stranger, cockatrice. This Frankenstein dish involves sewing together half a pig and half a capon, a fattened rooster. Yes. Sewn together. Then roasted as one beast. It's disturbing. It's festive. It's a conversation starter. And it's very popular at medieval wedding feasts. You approach cautiously. The meat smells incredible, but the presentation, let's just say your glad modern weddings stick to cupcakes. And speaking of sweets, here come the sugar animals. Marzipan hedgehogs. Candied squirrels. Even a fox gnawing on a licorice goose. Children scream with delight. Adults cheer as if a knight just won a duel. The sugar sculptures aren't just cute, they're political. Each animal represents a trait the family claims: cunning, loyalty, fertility, wealth. You suspect the rat in front of the father-in-law wasn't intentional, but no one dares say so. You try a marzipan snail. It tastes like almonds, honey, and one poor decision. Still, you smile politely. Next comes the black broth. A grim, oily soup once eaten by Spartan warriors, now resurrected here for reasons no one explains. It's thick, salty, and probably illegal in 5 countries. You pass. The man next to you drinks 3 bowls and begins reciting medieval bird calls. The peasants, you notice, eat from communal trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread that double as plates. At the end of the meal, these are given to the poor. Or eaten by dogs. Or tossed at distant relatives. Historians still argue whether this bread plate charity was genuine generosity or a convenient way to dispose of inedible carbs. Suddenly, the bride and groom rise. They approach the salt mound. Yes, a literal pile of salt shaped like a small pyramid and decorated with rosemary. Why? Because salt is sacred. It purifies, preserves, and symbolizes loyalty. Sharing salt in front of witnesses means you'll protect each other from betrayal and, apparently, spoilage. They each take a pinch and toss it into the fire. It hisses. A cheer goes up. You lean back, dizzy from food smells, salt smoke, and the distinct aroma of burning rosemary. Someone passes you a tiny pie. You think, oh good, something normal. You take a bite. It chirps. The pie is alive. You spit it out, only to realize you've just experienced one of the most bizarre wedding tricks, the live bird pie. It's real. Medieval cooks would bake a hollow crust, load it with live birds, and then serve it, so that when the crust was cut open, the birds would fly out, delighting, or terrifying, the guests. You cough, slightly traumatized, while a lark flutters by and lands in someone's soup. Why go to all this trouble? Because spectacle meant power. A family who could afford to waste sugar on sculptures, meat on performance art, and birds on chaos was showing off their wealth. And also, probably, their lack of bedtime. Not all of it's performative, though. In one quiet corner of the hall, a man kneels before a platter of roasted hare and mutters a prayer to Saint Valentine. He carefully selects the heart, wraps it in rosemary, and offers it to the couple. A love charm. You hear murmurs, it's meant to give strength to their bond. Others scoff, claiming the man's done this at every wedding for years and remains tragically single. You try to imagine a modern couple carving a roast fox under fairy lights and a DJ. Not quite the same vibe. Back at your end of the table, someone's pouring hippocras, a spiced wine full of cinnamon, ginger, and enough cloves to stun a mule. It's poured through a cloth called a manica and served in wooden cups. You take a sip. It's like drinking hot perfume, strangely pleasant. Very medieval. The conversation turns to food omens. Did the peacock's head tilt east? That's a sign of fertile fields. Did the marzipan squirrel break before the children touched it? An omen of discord. You stare at your half-bitten snail. It's still intact. Good luck, maybe? Or a warning? A toast is made, and the groom raises his goblet high. May our bellies stay full and our enemies stay drunker than we are. It gets a roaring laugh. You raise yours too. Your cup is empty. You pretend to sip anyway. One last dish arrives before the dancing begins, a giant pie, this one blessedly inert, that smells of saffron, figs, and something suspiciously like cinnamon bark. It's the end cap dish, meant to send off the savory portion of the feast and signal the start of music, games, and the inevitable collapse of someone's dignity. You sink back onto the bench, full of food, sugar, stories, and sounds. The roasted peacock is still there, staring across the room with its glassy, decorative eyes. You stare back. It blinks. Okay, maybe that's the Hippocrates talking. You're clutching your stomach like a knight holding in a battle wound, when a sudden chorus of cheers announces the next event. It's not another toast, or a surprise marzipan weasel. It's something far more awkward, the bedding ritual. You blink. Surely they won't actually. Oh, yes. Yes, they will. Now, don't panic. No one's getting naked in front of the roast boar, not unless things really go off the rails. But this tradition? It's as close as you'll get to live-action matrimony theater, and you've got front-row seats, whether you like it or not. The bride and groom are hoisted up, not invited, not led, hoisted, by their respective families. The crowd parts as if Moses himself were parting the seas of cabbage and candle wax. The groom is carried in a wheelbarrow. He doesn't resist. The bride rides atop a hay bale throne held aloft by her uncles, who chant something that sounds vaguely obscene. The two are paraded like trophies toward the bedchamber, if you can call it that. It's really just a curtained alcove with a straw mattress, a few sheep skins, and someone's discarded goblet. A child scuttles out from behind the curtain, giggling. Great. It's pre-warmed. Here's where it gets truly strange. The bedding ritual involves an audience. Not a big one, but enough to make you sweat on someone else's behalf. Family members gather at the door or just outside the curtains while the couple is gently, or not so gently, deposited into the bed, fully dressed, to lie beside each other while their friends and relatives yell encouragements. It's basically the medieval version of a wedding night tutorial, minus the privacy. You overhear a whisper: if she laughs, it's a good omen. If he sneezes, it's bad. You pray for silence. He sneezes. Once they're positioned in the bed, hands folded, cheeks red, eyes wide, the real fun starts. The pillow tossing. This is not symbolic. This is exactly what it sounds like. Guests line up to hurl pillows into the bed. If one lands perfectly between them, it means harmony. If it bounces off the groom and knocks over the candle, it means arguments about goats. Obviously. The first pillow is tossed. Too high, it hits the curtain rod. Second pillow, too low, it rolls off and the dog steals it. Third one lands between them, bounces, and smacks the bride in the face. She laughs. Everyone cheers. Omen status, unclear, but highly entertaining. This ritual, strange as it may seem, had a point. In many parts of medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was witnessed by at least one official or family representative to confirm the marriage was truly sealed. Not consummated in that moment, just that the couple was now alone together, in bed, as man and wife. The actual consummation was often left to private time. Hopefully. But some regions? They went further. A few unlucky couples were expected to consummate the marriage with observers. Sometimes the bedding cloths were examined afterward. Sometimes the couple was pelted with rice, nuts, or even coins, because nothing says romance like dodging airborne legumes. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or just documented in salacious court records. You sincerely hope it's the latter. Back in the feast hall, guests are already making jokes. A group of young men sings a bawdy tune called "He'll Need More Than Ale Tonight," while an elderly aunt mimics a snore and mutters, "Let's hope he remembers which end to kiss." You choke on your hippocras. Meanwhile, the bride's younger sister is collecting shoes. Yes, shoes. Turns out, another tradition is the stolen shoe game. Guests sneak away one of the bride's shoes during the bedding ritual, then ransom it back. The groom must pay, usually in sweets or coin, or perform a task to retrieve it. Tonight, it's reciting a love poem with a spoon in his mouth. He does. It's unintelligible. Everyone claps anyway. You can't help but admire the absurdity. In a time when life was harsh, uncertain, and usually muddy, wedding rituals served a bigger purpose than just celebration. They reminded people to laugh. To join together. To witness something beautiful, even if it involved feathers in soup and poetry with cutlery. The curtain falls. Not literally, but the bedding area is officially sealed. A wreath is hung on the curtain rod. Bells are tied to the door. If anyone leaves too early, they must answer 3 riddles. You make a mental note never to stand too close to the exit. The guests pour back into the hall. More food appears, somehow. You spot a pie shaped like a castle and a cheese wheel with a mote of mustard. A man attempts to toast with an entire loaf. It doesn't go well. A hush again. Not dramatic this time, sleepy. Full-bellied. Someone near the hearth begins humming a lullaby. It's gentle, lilting, and somehow off-key in the most comforting way. A few guests sway with it. Others lay their heads on folded arms or stolen cloaks. But one woman, older, sharp-eyed, possibly enchanted, begins telling a story. A love story. About 2 farmers who met during a hailstorm, fell in love over burnt porridge, and were married by accident during a barn blessing. You think she's making it up. No one cares. Everyone leans in. The bride's younger cousin passes out in a bowl of stewed apples. The dog licks his ear. No one stops him. You lean back, listening to the story, to the fire, to the slow, rhythmic breathing of a hall full of exhausted revelers. You feel warm, sleepy, like maybe you're part of something older than logic, sillier than reason, and somehow sacred. The bedding was bizarre. The pillows were aggressive. But in this odd, smoky barn full of strangers and stew, you feel something lovely. Just as your eyelids begin to sag and you contemplate using a bread trencher as a pillow, there's a sudden jangle of sound, bells, again. Not the ceremonial wedding bells from earlier, but smaller, janglier, and definitely more vegetable adjacent. A door creaks. People cheer. You blink awake to witness a line of women entering the hall with garlic necklaces. You sit upright. Is this a cook-off? A blessing? A protest against vampires? None of the above. This is the vegetal procession, a tradition with local variants across medieval Europe, where bridesmaids and eligible women would wear chains of pungent produce, onions, leeks, garlic, while parading before the couple. Each vegetable carried a meaning. Garlic meant purity and protection. Onions meant fertility. Leeks, well, historians still argue whether leeks were for stamina or just because they were in season. The scent hits you like a plague doctor's mask turned inside out. A child behind you dramatically faints into a pile of straw. The women begin to sing. It's not a hymn or a ballad, but a chant with rhymes that sound like farming advice. Garlic for truth, onions for pride, cabbage to keep your goats inside. The guests nod along. One man removes his cap in respect. You do the same, just in case. Now it's time for the onion toss. Think bridal bouquet, but messier and with more tears. The bride stands, holding a large onion wrapped in lace and rosemary. She spins once, shouts a blessing, and hurls the onion over her shoulder. It arcs through the smoky air like a fragrant meteor and lands in the arms of a woman with wild hair and a hopeful expression. She squeals with delight. Everyone claps. Someone sneezes violently. Legend has it, catching the onion means you'll marry within the year, or at least fall in love with someone who doesn't mind strong breath. You glance at your neighbor. She's chewing a clove of garlic like candy. You look away quickly. Meanwhile, bowls of pickled vegetables are being passed around. Some are spiced, some sweet, all of them potent. You're told to take one, any one, and whisper a wish into it before eating. You select a pickled beet. It glows unnaturally under the torchlight. You whisper, "May my feet not smell like goat by morning," and bite down. It's both crunchy and emotionally confusing. A man at the high table stands and raises a leek like a scepter. He declares it the noblest of vegetables, and proceeds to recite an ode. It goes on for 7 verses. The crowd endures it with the kind of loyalty only fueled by strong drink and social pressure. At the end, the leek is passed around and kissed by several guests. You consider faking a sneeze to avoid your turn. There's laughter and coughing and more chanting. Someone tries to juggle 3 turnips. They succeed. Barely. In the far corner of the hall, a new ritual begins, the tear collection. Not emotional ones, actual tears. A silver bowl is passed around, and each unmarried woman is expected to cry into it. Don't ask how they make it happen. Pinched arms, sniffed onions, even whispered sad stories. Remember the goat who drowned in the well? Why? Because a bowl of maiden tears is thought to carry blessings if poured over the threshold of the couple's home the next morning. You think this is absurd. And yet, you find yourself wiping a tear after someone recounts the tale of a widow who planted a single leek each year in memory of her husband. By year 20, the field fed her entire village. Your tear hits the bowl with a tiny splash. Someone pats your shoulder. You feel oddly better. Next comes the garland game. Guests form a circle and pass around a wreath made of braided garlic cloves, leeks, and rosemary. When the music stops, whoever holds the garland must give a blessing, or an embarrassing confession. The first victim, a red-cheeked blacksmith, blesses the couple with, "May your pigs always find their truffles." The second? She admits she once ate an entire onion raw to impress a suitor. Reader, it did not work. You suspect some people are intentionally holding onto the garland when the music slows. It's now a platform for chaotic honesty. Finally, a man wearing a hat full of potatoes, don't ask, steps forward with a wooden ladle. He announces the closing of the vegetable rites and scoops a bowl of mixed pickles for the couple. They must feed each other, blindfolded. It goes about as well as you'd expect. The groom ends up with a garlic clove in his ear. The bride eats a beet that was definitely dropped on the floor. They laugh until they cry. Someone adds their tears to the bowl. We've come full circle. You marvel at how something so silly, so rooted in root vegetables, can be so oddly sweet. The symbolism is layered, much like the onions themselves. Protection, fertility, humility, and seasoning. In a world where medicine was limited and superstition was survival, these rituals offered hope. Hope that stinky breath might mean strong love. That garlic could guard your soul. That cabbage could keep the worms out of your relationship. Historians debate whether these rites were taken seriously or just done for fun. You suspect it was both. After all, if you can make a whole room laugh with a well-timed onion toss, and maybe also keep away the plague, why not? The fire crackles low. The wreath is hung above the couple's table. The silver tear bowl is sealed with wax. The garland is placed on the hearth, to be burned at sunrise. And you? You're nursing a lukewarm goblet of spiced turnip juice, something you didn't know existed until 10 minutes ago, and feeling strangely comforted. Because somewhere between the chanting and the crying, the singing and the vegetable juggling, this chaotic bundle of rituals has made marriage feel less like a contract, and more like a village-wide prayer. A loud snore erupts from under a bench. The blacksmith, drunk on pickle brine, has finally passed out. Someone covers him with a leek. Perfect. The pickles have barely settled in your stomach when a shrill note slices through the lull, a sound like a cat being squeezed through a lute string. Heads turn. Some guests cover their ears. Others cheer. You brace yourself as a troupe of colorfully dressed minstrels saunter in, instruments in hand, and expressions full of mischief. This is not your grandmother's chamber ensemble. These are bawdy minstrels, and they've got one job: to poke, prod, embarrass, and entertain, usually all at once. Their instruments include lutes, bagpipes, a hurdy-gurdy, and something that looks suspiciously like a dried-out pig bladder on a stick. You suspect it makes noise. You pray it doesn't. The lead minstrel, a wiry man with hair like straw and a grin that screams, "I've been kicked out of 5 churches," strums his lute and bellows a greeting, to the bride and groom, "May your nights be noisy and your goats never interrupt." Applause. Laughter. A few nervous glances toward the goats. Then the music begins. It's fast, wild, and somehow sounds like both a tavern brawl and a flirtation. You find your foot tapping involuntarily. The guests begin clapping in time. One of the minstrels climbs onto a bench and starts rapping, medieval style. Not quite Eminem, more like Geoffrey Chaucer after 3 mugs of mead. The lyrics? They are intimate. Let's just say there's a whole stanza dedicated to the groom's supposed acorn, and whether or not it will grow into a mighty oak. The bride's cheeks flush crimson. The groom laughs and tries to hide under a pie. You choke on your drink. A man behind you says, "They sang the same one at my cousin's wedding, except it was about carrots." This is roasting as ritual. The minstrels spare no one. They poke fun at the bride's father, "May his nose always point north so we can find the ale," the groom's hairline, more forehead than forethought, and even the dowry pig, who is now snoring in the corner. But the biggest crowd pleaser? The rude rhymes. These are quick, dirty little ditties, no curse words, but loaded with double meanings, that guests are encouraged to invent on the spot. It's a game. A dangerous one. A woman stands and sings. The groom may be brave and his sword may be wide. But it's not the blade he'll be using tonight. Everyone erupts in laughter. Even the monks are giggling. Not to be outdone, a boy of maybe 12 shouts. The bride is fair, her eyes like dew. But let's hope she doesn't snore like Uncle Hugh. The camera pans to Uncle Hugh, who's already asleep, mouth open, with a turnip balanced on his chest. You watch as rhyme after rhyme flies through the air, some clever, some cringe-worthy, all met with roaring approval. It's a way to release tension. A little ridicule before responsibility. And it humanizes the couple. After all, if you've been publicly teased about your ears, your dancing, and your marital prospects, the next day's arguments about who left the door open feel less tragic. Historians note that this tradition, known in some places as joking the bridegroom, had roots in ancient communal rites. By mocking the couple, the village reaffirmed its closeness to them. Laughter was a form of love. Embarrassment was a rite of passage. And deep down, everyone knew, if the joke stopped, something was wrong. Then, the minstrels begin the wedding ballad. A long, meandering tale sung in harmonies about a knight who marries a goose, yes, a literal goose, only to discover she's a princess under a curse. He breaks the curse by letting her lay an egg in his hat. The song ends with a moral about patience, poultry, and marital compromise. You have no idea what just happened, but you're clapping. The children are now gathered in a circle around one minstrel who specializes in naughty riddles. PG-13, mostly. One goes. I'm long and I'm stiff and I point to the sky. But when rain starts to fall, I curl up and cry. The answer? A feather. You were thinking something else. Shame on you. As the night deepens and the jokes turn more ridiculous than raunchy, something shifts again. The music softens. One minstrel brings out a flute, another a gentle harp. They begin to play a love song, not one of laughter, but of longing. The room hushes. Couples draw closer. Eyes grow glassy. A few guests sway in time. The lyrics are in old tongue, but you catch the gist. Love is a thread spun of flame and feather. We braid it through storms, and we keep it together. You feel something stir. Maybe it's the mead. Maybe it's the marrow-deep ache of seeing joy and vulnerability woven into something so raw and real. Even the pickled beet cousin is dabbing at his eyes. But before the moment gets too tender, the minstrels flip the mood with a final send-off. May your bed creak not for mice, but delight. And may your in-laws stay out of sight. The crowd explodes in laughter once more, and the minstrels take a theatrical bow, nearly knocking over a table of candied roots. And just like that, they're gone, vanishing out the door with their hurdy-gurdies, pig bladders, and trail of laughter. You lean back, dizzy with sound and sugar and scandal. The rhymes echo in your head. The laughter lingers. And though you've never been serenaded by a man holding a leek like a lute, you feel strangely honored. Because in the absurdity of these rude songs and cheeky rhymes lies a deeper truth: marriage isn't just about solemn vows or roasted peacocks. It's also about being teased, being witnessed, and finding someone who'll laugh at your terrible rhymes for the rest of your life. You're still chuckling from the Goose Princess song when a new smell wafts through the feast hall, rich, buttery, and, suspiciously birdy. The laughter fades into murmurs. Heads swivel. Someone claps their hands and shouts, "The pie is coming." You brace yourself. You've seen pies before. You've been inside a pie riot. But nothing quite prepares you for what rolls in next. It's enormous. It takes 4 people to carry. Its crust is shiny and glazed, golden like a well-oiled shield, and embossed with flourishes that resemble vines, hearts, and something that might be a winged hedgehog. The crowd parts like an oily sea as the pie is hoisted onto the center table. You think, finally. Just food. Then the pie moves. You blink. Someone else gasps. A rustling, flapping sound emerges from within. The crust lifts slightly. A feather pokes out. Then, whoosh, a flurry of live birds bursts forth like feathery fireworks. Sparrows. Doves. Maybe a confused finch. They shoot into the rafters, dive between candelabras, and nearly take out the lute player. A woman drops her goblet. A man shouts, "It's a sign." A child cheers, "It's magic." It's not magic. It's a live bird pie, a culinary prank of the highest order. The birds weren't baked, of course, just sealed under a cooked crust with air holes and carefully released at the right time. You've now officially witnessed the medieval answer to dinner and a show. Why? Because spectacle. Because weddings were the social Super Bowl of the year. And if you could afford to waste a few doves on theatrics, it meant your family had wealth, influence, and questionable regard for bird anxiety. Some pies included frogs. Others, butterflies. One record tells of a dwarf popping out of a pie singing a blessing. Historians still argue whether that one was literal or metaphorical. Either way, you suddenly find the fluttering birds around your head oddly tame in comparison. The bride catches a dove mid-flight. She kisses it and releases it out the window, which earns her a chorus of toos and several dramatic swoons. The groom, not to be outdone, tries to catch one himself, but only manages to knock over a candle. A cousin saves it before the tablecloth ignites. Everyone cheers. You decide to stay seated. Then comes the slicing of the real pie, not the hollow bird hotel, but the second, secret one, filled with meat, nuts, raisins, and enough spices to knock out a bear. This one's for eating. Sort of. The bride cuts the first slice and feeds it to the groom. This is symbolic. She's feeding the house. In return, the groom cuts a slice and feeds her. He's offering protection. You wonder if any marriage was ever annulled because someone missed their mouth. It seems very possible. The guests line up for their own slices. Everyone's watching for omens in the pie. That's right, this pie is practically an oracle. A whole almond? Wealth. A green olive? A long journey. A bit of feather? Miscommunication. A piece of bone? Twins. Maybe. You take your slice and carefully inspect it. There's a raisin shaped like a heart. A good sign, apparently. You nod solemnly and bite in. It's spiced, sweet, gamey, and slightly alarming, but in a good way. Meanwhile, a sudden commotion at the back of the hall signals the start of the pie chase. Another tradition. One of the pies, no one knows which, contains a silver token. Whoever finds it must perform a dance or a feat to unlock the couple's future. It's like a medieval fortune cookie, but with more calories and higher social stakes. A boy yells, "I've got it," and promptly sprints across the hall with a half-eaten pie slice. A crowd chases him. He leaps over a bench, dodges an ant, and nearly crashes into the roast peacock. When caught, he's hoisted up and spun around until he's dizzy. Then, he's told to recite a verse predicting the bride's future. He squints, thinks, and shouts, "She'll bear strong sons and louder daughters, and her goats shall never stray." It's a hit. People slap his back. Someone tries to pay him in cheese. The bride laughs so hard she nearly drops her goblet. Back at the table, the crusts of the pie are being distributed to the elderly. Not because they can chew it better, but because they must. Old lore says the crust contains the memory of the feast, eating it ties your spirit to the celebration. Some wrap it in cloth and keep it in cupboards. Others toss it into the fireplace, hoping for a clean burn. No smoke equals happy marriage. A man offers his crust to the fire. It flares blue. Gasps all around. He raises his eyebrows dramatically and says, "I knew it. My daughter's betrothed is cursed." She smacks him with a spoon. The crowd loves it. More pies emerge, small ones this time. Lovers' pies, filled with fruit and arranged in pairs. They're gifted to couples at the feast. You're handed one by a very determined child. You have to eat it with someone, she says. At the same time, you look around. Your table neighbor, the garlic candy chewer, raises an eyebrow. You shrug. One bite each. She laughs. The child approves. You are now, officially, blessed by pie. You overhear someone say this was all invented by a bored baker with too many birds. Others claim it was started by royalty. Some say the pies were meant to confuse evil spirits, who'd chase the birds instead of cursing the marriage. Regardless, it's become a fixture. The feast slows. The birds settle in the rafters. The pie crumbs are swept up by a broom made of rosemary. The fire crackles low. You lean back, full of food, feathers, and faint dread that tomorrow someone's going to wake you for goat herding. But tonight? Tonight, you survived a pie with wings, divined your future from a raisin, and ate dessert with a stranger who smells like garlic. Not bad, for medieval matrimony. You're mid-yawn, plotting the best route to the least drafty hay pile, when the crowd suddenly erupts. At first, you think someone tripped over the fire dog again. But no, This roar of laughter has purpose. People are pointing, cheering, some even clapping to a rhythm. There's chaos, but joyous chaos. The bride is gone. Or more accurately, she's been stolen. It's a tradition, you're told, shouted into your ear by a man wearing a cabbage leaf as a hat. The bridal abduction. It's time. He grins, then bolts out the hall with half a carrot. You follow the movement of the crowd like a medieval meerkat, scanning for clues. Apparently, the bride's friends, usually unmarried women, and at least one wildly enthusiastic cousin, have snuck her away from the main feast and hidden her somewhere in the village. It's now the groom's task to find her. No pressure. The point? A symbolic reenactment of the old days when marriages were formed by less consensual means. The tradition's been softened over time, obviously. But the energy remains. The groom must prove himself by chasing, solving clues, or occasionally bribing his way to his beloved. There may or may not be shoe theft involved. Ah, yes. The shoe. You spot it now, a single, lace-wrapped slipper held high above a rowdy group of villagers. It's the bride's. And it's been stolen. The thief, a young man with a feathered cap and a face that says, "I've done this before," leads a conga line of dancers through the hall, chanting, "No bride, no shoe, no peace for you." You glance at the groom, who's now blindfolded and spinning in a slow circle, trying to find the direction of the chase. It's unclear whether he's drunk or just method acting. A challenge is issued. In order to retrieve the bride, he must complete a series of tasks, ranging from the silly to the slightly humiliating. Tonight's lineup includes guessing who just kissed him, hint, it was a goat. Reciting a love poem using only vegetable names. Drinking ale from the stolen shoe. You almost hope he fails, purely for the entertainment. The shoe-drinking tradition, while seemingly revolting, was once seen as a test of devotion and a charm for good fortune. Historians still argue whether it originated in military rituals or just very bored wedding guests with poor hygiene standards. Either way, tonight it's happening, and the crowd loves it. The poem is worse. The groom bellows. "Oh my dearest turnip, my artichoke sweet. Your eyes are like beets, your love can't be beat." A lute strums in approval. Someone wipes away a tear, possibly from laughter. Then it's time for the hunt. The villagers begin tossing him clues, riddles, scraps of fabric, even a trail of leeks tied together. He follows them, staggering between the torchlit paths. You and half the village follow behind, shouting encouragement and bad directions. At one point he's led to the blacksmith's shed, only to discover a scarecrow in a wedding veil. A decoy. The crowd roars. Finally, a giggle gives her away. She's hidden under a wheelbarrow behind the herb garden, crowned with rosemary and wearing the groom's belt. He kneels, dramatically, and presents the shoe. She places her foot inside. It fits. Obviously. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a cabbage-scented love story. The return procession is loud and proud. They parade through the village square like royalty returning from battle. Children throw onion peels. Drummers bang enthusiastically. Someone lights a torch that fizzles immediately but earns applause anyway. Back in the hall, the couple is awarded the blessing pillow, a decorated cushion embroidered with vines, animals, and slightly disturbing cherubs. They must sit on it together and answer 3 questions shouted by the elder of the village. Tonight's questions are: where did you first see each other? What food would you never share, even in love? What is your spouse's best feature, and worst dance move? The answers come fast. First glance. By the grain stall. Never share. Pickled eggs. Best feature. Her eyes. Worst dance move. The flailing leg thing she does when startled. It's honest. It's hilarious. It's clearly love. But wait, What's this? A final test? Enter the bridal gauntlet. It sounds intense, but it's really a game where the bride must navigate a short obstacle course built by her friends, usually involving balancing a spoonful of jam, dodging thrown flower petals, and avoiding stepping on a cabbage head carved to look like the mother-in-law. Why? Because if she can keep her footing, the marriage will be stable. If she slips, the guests get another excuse to toast. She succeeds. Barely. The cabbage mother-in-law is unharmed. The crowd cheers. A toast is made in honor of the couple's successful reunion. It's long, overly dramatic, and ends with a rhyme. Let no shoe go missing, no bride disappear. May love fill your bellies and not just the beer. Glasses are raised. You raise yours too, even if it's empty. A hand clinks your goblet anyway. You glance at the newlyweds. Disheveled. Glowing. Possibly tipsy. Entirely triumphant. And it dawns on you, this whole chaotic ritual, the chase, the rhymes, the tasks, isn't just a game. It's a preview. Of compromise. Of loyalty. Of how a couple handles the absurd with a straight face and a shared laugh. Because what is marriage, really, if not a lifetime of chasing each other through strange towns with missing shoes? Just when you think the night's theatrics have peaked, birds in pies, pickled confessionals, and a missing bride sprinting across hay fields, someone slams a mug on the table and bellows, "Bring the lutes. And bring the worst dancers." Oh no. Welcome to the lute battles and drunken dance-offs, the part of the feast where dignity takes a holiday, music takes center stage, and someone inevitably splits their trousers mid-jig. The first contestant is already tuning his lute with all the confidence of a man who once serenaded a chicken and was told it laid more eggs because of it. He wears a vest of velvet, breeches that are perhaps one generation from disintegration, and the grin of a bard who fears neither shame nor sobriety. His opponent is a girl no older than 16, with a pipe fashioned from a goose quill and the gleam of impending triumph in her eyes. The rules? Loose at best. Each musician must perform a short tune, ideally improvised and ridiculous. Extra points for using obscure farm animals as metaphors. The audience decides the winner through raucous applause, or just throwing turnips in the air. The man begins with a ballad titled, "My Love is Like a Leaky Roof." It's surprisingly poignant, though he loses points when he forgets the second verse and fills in with chicken clucks. The girl responds with a high-pitched, rapid-fire melody about a cow that ran off with a baker. It rhymes. It's scandalous. It's a hit. The crowd votes. The turnips fly. One hits a lute. The girl is crowned tonight's lute queen, and someone tapes a feather to her head in celebration. Now the dancers take the floor. And floor is generous, it's mostly packed earth, slippery with spilled drink and rogue raisins. But the challenge is on. Drunken dance-offs are exactly what they sound like. Guests challenge one another to improvise duels of movement, style, and who can avoid falling onto a dog. They form a loose circle, shouting names, clapping in rhythm, daring the brave and the foolish. A burly man named Jory stomps out first. He performs what might be a war dance, or perhaps he's just shaking beetles out of his boots. It involves a lot of squatting and clapping, and ends with him spinning until he collapses into a barrel of pickled trout. His opponent? The bride's grandmother. Tiny, silver-haired, and absolutely terrifying. She slides onto the floor with the grace of a swan on butter. Her dance includes sharp elbows, hip wiggles, and something that looks suspiciously like fencing footwork. She wins by unanimous, stunned silence. Next up, the groom, urged on by chants of "dance or be doomed." He accepts with noble determination, lifts his tunic just slightly, for freedom of motion, he claims, and proceeds to gallop in a tight circle while flapping his arms like a startled duck. It's avant-garde. It ends with him landing flat on his back. The crowd loves it. A man declares, he's proven his worth. Then it's your turn. Oh yes. Someone shoves you forward before you can protest. A drumbeat starts. The room chants, "New blood. New blood." You panic. You flail. You spin. You somehow invent a move that combines air churning and attempted flight. Someone calls it, the spinning sheep. It sticks. They chant your name. You survive. But this isn't just chaos. These rituals have history. Medieval dance-offs, while not formally documented as battles, were popular forms of community bonding. Music and movement were ways of channeling joy, tension, and surplus energy. Some scholars suggest these antics evolved from older fertility rites, where rhythmic group motion symbolized agricultural abundance and spiritual unity. Others think people were just really bored and slightly tipsy. Regardless, they matter. Because in these ridiculous moves, in these lute solos and stomp circles, people dropped their masks. Nobles danced with blacksmiths. Cooks sang with squires. Everyone became just people. Sweaty, breathless, silly people celebrating the fact that two other people had decided to link lives. One woman breaks into a solo jig involving 2 spoons and a rope. A man responds with a dramatic collapse meant to symbolize heartbreak. It accidentally flattens a pie. No one cares. The bride joins in, hoisting her skirts and hopping with wild, unladylike joy. The groom follows, tripping over a trencher and sliding into a group of monks, who then start their own coordinated shuffle called the Blessed Bounce. As the music peaks, the whole room surges into a group dance, some version of a circle reel mixed with stomps and claps and joyful chaos. You link arms with garlic chewer and a stranger wearing a crown made of baked apples. The floor shakes. The air hums. You are part of something, in a way that feels ancient and electric. The musicians play faster. People sweat, laugh, stumble, recover. A small dog howls along. Eventually, the tempo slows. The instruments fade one by one. The dancers sway, winded and flushed, collapsing into heaps of cloaks, arms draped over friends and strangers alike. The lute queen strums a final chord. It's off-key. It's perfect. In the stillness that follows, you realize something: these antics weren't filler. They weren't just entertainment. They were release. Celebration. A way of saying, life is short, winter is long, and tonight, at least, we dance. Because tomorrow brings work. Duty. Possibly an awkward conversation with your cousin about the pie you accidentally sat on. But tonight? Tonight, you dance like a spinning sheep and live to tell the tale. You're nursing your pride, and possibly a bruised knee from the spinning sheep, when the tables are cleared and something new arrives, the status plates. Now, this isn't a polite dinner game. This is a full-blown medieval social ranking ritual disguised as a meal. And you're about to see just how seriously people take boiled boar snouts and ornamental pies. It starts subtly. Servants bring out trays, not just to refill goblets or scrape pigeon feathers off the trencher bread, but to swap out dishes. New platters are placed with suspiciously theatrical flourish. One guest receives a modest bowl of lentils. Another? An entire roasted boar's head with an apple in its mouth and sprigs of sage jammed in its nostrils. Everyone pretends not to notice, but trust me, they notice. This is the food status game. The principle is simple: what you eat shows who you are. And at a wedding feast like this, especially with a noble family involved, it's not just about taste. It's about position. You glance at your own plate. A wedge of turnip tart, a bit of salted herring, and a suspicious pudding that quivers when you look at it too hard. Definitely mid-tier. You're neither royalty nor riffraff. Congratulations? Across the hall, a merchant's cousin loudly receives a blood pudding tower, stacked like a meaty wedding cake. He puffs out his chest as if crowned by sausage. Meanwhile, a servant discreetly hands a boy a cup of barley porridge and a wink. He's clearly eaten from someone else's bowl. No one stops him. Everyone smiles a little wider. Now the nobles are served. Their platters aren't just meals, they're performance pieces. One man is brought a boar's head stuffed with nuts, raisins, and, why not, cooked songbirds. Another receives fish molded into the shape of a swan, complete with a parsley beak and peppercorn eyes. It's both majestic and disturbing. A woman 2 seats down is given a pie shaped like a tower, topped with gilded cherries and edible antlers. She blinks slowly. It's a metaphor, someone whispers. But here's the twist, those who receive the most extravagant, bizarre, or grotesque dishes aren't necessarily the wealthiest. No, no. They're the most honored. Or the most mocked. That's the fun part. You see, in medieval times, food at weddings didn't just nourish, it signaled. Want to flatter someone? Give them a roast peacock with sugar-plum stuffing. Want to roast them socially? Serve them tripe molded into a portrait of their own face. And that brings us to the next course, the test platter. It's a surprise dish, delivered to the couple, meant to test their composure, humor, and stomach. Tonight's offering? A large meat pie, that oozes something purple. No one knows what it is. Everyone watches. The bride lifts a spoonful, sniffs it, then nods. Delightful, she says. She doesn't eat it, but that's not the point. Her grace earns a cheer. The groom, perhaps emboldened by mead, takes a bite. His eye twitches. He smiles through it. You're a brave man, says someone nearby. Or very foolish. You clap politely. The pie is carried away like a champion gladiator. Then comes the game of bites. Here, guests are challenged to take a bite from a randomly chosen dish, blindfolded. They must guess what it is and then make up a story about how it was prepared. The results are legendary. One man is fed what he claims is boiled owl with hints of sorrow. Turns out it's spiced lamb. A woman bites into something crispy and proclaims, ah yes, dragon toe, cured in elderberry tears. It's pickled beet skin. Everyone applauds. You're next. Blindfolded, you're handed a spoonful of something creamy and slightly smoky. Your guess? Mashed eel mixed with remorse and Monday morning rain. The crowd roars. It's just garlic and mashed turnips. You earn the honorary title of Poet of the Pan. And don't think the clergy are left out. A monk is served a dish shaped like the devil, made entirely of saffron rice and dried figs. To remind us of temptation, someone jokes. The monk laughs and bites off the devil's nose. But it's not all fun and games. At the far end of the hall, a quiet table receives simple fare, bread, cheese, dried apples. You ask why. A nearby guest explains they're the memory table, a place set for ancestors, lost loved ones, or spirits not in attendance. A solemn pause follows. Even in this cacophony of meat towers and lute solos, there's space for silence. You look down at your pudding. Still trembling. Still untrustworthy. You nudge it aside and watch as another round of toasts begins, this time based entirely on what people were served. Got goose? To your wild heart. Got cheese shaped like a wheel? May your fortunes roll forth. Got only broth? May your spirit never go dry, even if your supper does. Your toast? To the turnip, humble, honest, and always confused for a radish. You raise your mug. Someone throws a pea in your direction. You take it as a compliment. As the final course is cleared, and platters return to the kitchen with scraps and stories, the hierarchy fades once again into laughter and crumbs. Because at the end of the feast, whether you ate peacock or porridge, danced like royalty or rolled in pudding, Everyone here witnessed the same thing, a marriage sealed not just in bread and wine, but in spectacle, surprise, and shared absurdity. You look at the couple. They're glowing, not just from the firelight or the wine, but from surviving this. The tests. The games. The gelatinous food pyramids. And you realize, no matter what was served tonight, they've been fed something rare, each other's resilience. The food is finished. The crumbs have settled. Somewhere behind you, someone is softly snoring into a pillow shaped like a radish. You think things are winding down, gently drifting toward post-feast naps and soft lute melodies. And then, you hear it. A toast. Loud, sharp, pointed, and unmistakably barbed. The voice cuts through the haze of satisfaction like a turnip through warm butter. May the bride always keep her eyes open, and her pantry locked. A gasp. A chuckle. A clang as someone drops their goblet. All eyes swivel toward the speaker, the groom's mother. She stands, rigid and regal, in an outfit that could probably deflect arrows. Her voice is buttered with politeness and wrapped in just enough sarcasm to keep plausible deniability. And this? This is the in-law toast ritual, also known in some regions as the ceremonial airing of thinly veiled grievances. You brace yourself. This part of the feast? It's not edible. It's emotional. She continues, we welcome this fine young woman to our family, though her onions are soft and her cider strong enough to bleach linen. More polite laughter. The bride's smile tightens. The groom doesn't blink. He's been training for this. This is tradition. A strange, uncomfortable, sometimes hilarious ritual where both families, usually the elder women, offer their blessings in the form of critiques. Passive-aggressive poetry. Compliments with splinters in them. It's said to be rooted in an older custom where elders shared hard-won wisdom, dressed in riddles and rhymes, naturally. Over time, it became a game of wit. A verbal joust. A reminder that marriage comes not only with a spouse but a whole new set of relatives you didn't get to choose. Now it's the bride's mother's turn. She stands, short and square, with a smile that says I have nothing to lose. She lifts her goblet, scans the room, and begins. May your wine stay sweet. Though the in-laws bite. And your bed remain warm. When your husband's out of sight. Oh. The hall erupts. That one stung. You sip your drink slowly, watching the silent battle unfold beneath the surface of smiles. Everyone's invested. Even the dog seems to be paying attention. Next comes the ceremonial passing of the bitter ale. A dark, syrupy brew is poured into a single goblet, traditionally brewed with bitter herbs like wormwood or horehound. It's said to symbolize the hardships of marriage, the fights, the cold mornings, the realization that your spouse doesn't know how to stack firewood correctly. The groom takes the first sip. Winces. Hands it to the bride. She drinks. Doesn't flinch. The crowd applauds. You'll survive, someone whispers. You drank the pain. Historians still argue whether this ritual was meant to prepare couples for the reality of marriage or simply to sober them up before the dancing started again. Either way, it's powerful. Symbolic. Unsettlingly bitter. And just when you think the worst is over, another figure stands, the uncle. Every wedding has one. The unpredictable wild card. He's already several goblets deep and wearing a hat made from a pie tin and goose feathers. He grins. I'll keep it brief, he says, clearly lying. What follows is a half-rhymed, meandering speech about his own wedding, a mysterious missing goat, and why his third wife still writes him angry letters in Latin. The crowd laughs. The bride looks confused. The groom tries not to fall asleep standing up. You love it. Because under all the poking and posturing, there's something real here. This is how they show they care. If the families didn't say anything, that would be the insult. The teasing means they've accepted you into the clan, cabbage stew and all. And once you've survived the bitter ale and the poetic burns, you've earned your place. Now comes the rebuttal. Yes, that's a thing. The bride and groom are allowed, expected, even, to respond with their own toast. One that's grateful, gracious, but also carries a flick of their own wit. A spark of their new union's identity. The bride stands. She raises her glass, straightens her shoulders, and says, to the mothers, "May your advice keep flowing as freely as your ale, and may we always nod while secretly doing the opposite." Roaring laughter. The groom adds, "And to our uncles, may your stories remain confusing, your jokes too long, and your wine always watered down." A perfect ending. The guests cheer. Someone beats a spoon on a drum. A roasted carrot is thrown in celebration. But beneath the laughter, something has shifted. This isn't just two people surviving a toast war. It's two families learning how to rub along, share space, and, despite wildly different bread seasoning philosophies, support the same future. And the ale? They pour the rest out onto the hearth. Leave bitterness behind, the elder says. The flames sizzle. The hall nods. You take a deep breath. The air is filled with smoke, sweat, mead, and the complicated scent of acceptance. Because love is hard. Families are harder. But sometimes all it takes is a well-aimed toast, a bitter brew, and a room full of strangers willing to laugh through the discomfort. You smile, raise your mug, and whisper the ancient prayer of wedding guests everywhere. Please, no more toasts. The air in the feast hall is shifting again, not because the fire's died down or someone's cracked open another questionable pie, but because the tone has grown, strange. Less noisy. More mystical. You notice it first in the hush that settles over the children. Then in the way people begin lighting bundles of herbs, whispering phrases that don't rhyme but carry the weight of something ancient. Welcome to the marriage blessings and cabbage spells. Yes, cabbage. You blink as a young girl tiptoes past you carrying a head of cabbage wrapped in lace and string. She's followed by others, some with parsley crowns, others with leeks tucked behind their ears. You've stumbled into the herbal circle, an old ritual blending folk medicine, agricultural superstition, and straight-up vegetable adoration. You have no idea what's happening. You are definitely staying. At the heart of it all sits the blessing elder, a woman who may be 90 or 900 years old, it's hard to tell. Her voice is soft but unwavering. Her hair is braided with thyme and woven through with dried lavender. She begins the invocation. Each herb has a meaning. Each vegetable, a purpose. Cabbage for fertility and endurance. Thyme for courage. Rosemary for memory and protection. Sage for wisdom, and as one woman notes, also for stuffing. She calls for the bride and groom to kneel on a blanket strewn with these offerings. They do, heads bowed, hands entwined. A silence falls. The elder takes the cabbage. "Do you accept this symbol of growth?" she asks. The groom nods. The bride whispers, "Yes, even if it smells strange." Laughter bubbles from the crowd, but it's soft. Respectful. Because for all the jokes about smelly vegetables and witchy old women, everyone here knows, this is the real blessing. The cabbage is rolled, yes, rolled, in a slow circle around the couple. Once. Twice. Thrice. Each rotation is for one element of life, body, mind, spirit. The fourth turn, the elder keeps for herself, whispering something you don't catch. The cabbage is then kissed by the bride, handed to the groom, and finally wrapped in a red cloth and placed near the hearth. It will stay there overnight. If the leaves wilt perfectly, the marriage will thrive. If they rot or crack, well, better plant better cabbage next year. Historians still argue whether this is pre-Christian fertility magic or just a hyper-seasonal farming community making the best of what they had in winter. But either way, there's power in it. Symbolism wrapped in layers, like the cabbage itself. Then comes the circle of spells. Guests gather, forming a ring around the couple. Each person offers a word, a wish, a phrase they hope the couple carries into the years ahead. But there's a rule: no direct blessings. Everything must be spoken in metaphor, riddle, or vegetable analogy. One man says, "May your carrots never split from the same row." A woman adds, "May your onions bloom late, but never alone." Someone else murmurs, "May your stew never need more than one spoon." You feel a lump in your throat. Or maybe it's the garlic again. Either way, this strange poetry is beautiful. A small child steps forward and says, "May your goats not eat each other's shoes." The crowd erupts in soft laughter. The elder nods approvingly. "Wisdom comes from unexpected mouths," she says. "And also goats." Now it's time for the herb toss. Each guest is handed a small bouquet: rosemary, sage, marjoram, and lavender, tied with twine. They must toss these herbs onto the blanket where the couple kneels. The way the bundles land, the way they roll, the way the herbs fall, these are all omens. You throw yours. It lands sideways, rosemary pointing east. East for renewal, someone whispers. May their future rise like the morning sun. The bride throws hers backward and it lands perfectly upright. A cheer erupts. That's a rare sign, loyalty through trials. The groom throws and hits his own foot. A woman jokes, "He's stuck with himself now." The crowd loves it. The bundles are gathered and placed on the fire. A sweet, smoky scent fills the room. It's calming. Dreamy. Like being wrapped in warm wool and lullabies. One final act remains. The elder reaches into a pouch and draws out a stone. Smooth, round, and worn from generations. She gives it to the couple. "This is your hearthstone," she says. "Pass it from hand to hand, whenever your voices rise or your hearts quiet. Let it remind you of tonight. Of roots. Of things that grow." They cradle it like something fragile and ancient. Because it is. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and picture it all: the herbs, the cabbage, the smoke rising. Not just blessings, but layers of community effort. Of belief. Of binding magic and meal preparation into one continuous, leaf-wrapped truth. Marriage isn't just about feasting. Or dancing. Or even enduring a lute solo. It's about planting something in the ground, awkwardly, hopefully, and trusting that with care, and compost, and a few good-hearted neighbors who speak in riddles, something strong will grow. The fire crackles low, casting flickering shadows across a hall now heavy with herb smoke and the warm haze of nearly over celebrations. You're just settling back, thinking surely the weirdest parts are behind you, when the doors creak open and a hush falls across the room. And in walks a man wearing nothing but socks and a goblet belt. You don't immediately react. You think perhaps you've nodded off and slipped into a particularly vivid dream. But no, the guests cheer. A spoon is banged against a kettle. The man grins, bows deeply, and strides in with the poise of someone who knows exactly what he's doing, even if no one else does. This, apparently, is the naked cupbearer. To be clear, he's not completely nude. He wears thick woolen socks, striped, a carefully arranged belt from which dangle 3 small goblets, and the self-assured smirk of someone deeply committed to tradition. His role? To serve wine to the newlyweds. His message? Humor, humility, and a reminder that beneath the wedding clothes, we're all just people. And yes, it's tradition. In some regions, especially among rowdier rural communities, the naked server was meant to shock the room into laughter one final time before the night waned. It was a nod to vulnerability, to the bearing of truth, and, depending on who you ask, to the fertility deities. Historians still argue whether it began as a religious rite, a parody of Roman customs, or simply because someone lost a bet and it stuck. The cupbearer struts across the hall, pouring a honeyed mead into the couple's cups with theatrical flourishes. The bride giggles. The groom tries not to make eye contact. Guests chant in rhythm, stomping their feet, clapping hands, and shouting. Bare feet, bare truth, bare the cup. Drink it down, now fill it up. You are offered a drink as well, from a safer, fully clothed server, thankfully, and you sip as the naked cupbearer disappears into the hallway, trailing rosemary leaves and applause. You think it can't get stranger. But then the fox arrives. Not a live fox. That would almost make more sense. No, this is a taxidermied fox, dressed in a gown made of old velvet, pearls sewn into its snout, and a tiny bridal crown perched jauntily on its ear. It's carried in with solemnity by two giggling boys and placed delicately on a cushion beside the couple's table. This is Lady Vulpa, someone tells you with reverence. She blesses the guests with cleverness and spice. You open your mouth, then close it again. Of course she does. Turns out, Lady Vulpa is part of a deeply peculiar custom, part mascot, part moral lesson. In many feasts, animals were anthropomorphized and honored as symbols. Foxes, in particular, were revered for cunning, adaptability, and, curiously, romantic mischief. If you got too drunk and ended up asleep in a pig trough, you'd been kissed by the fox. If you managed to sneak more pie than your cousin, the fox was guiding your hand. Tonight, she presides in silent judgment. And she's not the only odd guest. From across the room, a man walks in wearing a deer skull mask and bearing a staff entwined with ivy. He is the Green Stag, a woodland spirit impersonator whose job is to offer nature's blessing. He circles the hall slowly, murmuring what you assume are ancient forest rhymes. People bow. Children hide under tables. A goose honks nervously. When he reaches the couple, he lays a sprig of holly between them and whispers, "Let no winter enter your union uninvited." They nod solemnly. The stag bows and departs, trailing petals and awe. The wedding has officially entered its symbolist fever dream phase. One by one, more eccentric entities emerge. A woman in a bird mask carrying a lantern full of feathers. A boy dressed as a night beetle, crawling under tables and blessing guests with crumbs. A man in full armor, holding a radish on a pillow. No explanation is given. None is needed. You ask if this is all traditional. The person next to you shrugs. It is now. These characters, though exaggerated, reflect an old impulse, to honor the elements of life through storytelling, even absurdity. The fox? Cleverness in love. The stag? Strength in hard seasons. The beetle? Persistence, survival, maybe an inside joke no one remembers. The ritual concludes when Lady Vulpa is offered a sliver of pie, placed gently in front of her snout. It disappears later in the night, no one admitting who took it. Rumors fly. The fox is pleased, someone says. You decide to believe it. A toast is called, to the beasts among us, may they be wise, and may we be wiser. You drink, smiling. Because this, too, is part of the medieval wedding magic. Beneath the strange costumes and woodland metaphors, there's a deep human truth: marriage is not just between two people. It's between their entire worlds, their fears, their humor, their inherited stories. And if a naked cupbearer and a fox in pearls help you laugh through the madness of union, then so be it. Let Lady Vulpa reign. You think you've seen it all: goose-blessed brides, feather pies, cupbearers in nothing but striped socks. But then the elder returns to center stage, raising her gnarled hand high in the air, and the room stills. Not out of fear, but anticipation. You sense something ancient in the air. Something itchier. Someone hands the bride a wooden comb. And someone else brings a linen sheet. No. It can't be what it sounds like. But oh, it is. This is the lice comb ritual. You watch in stunned disbelief as the bride, now seated on a stool that looks suspiciously like a butter churn, has her veil lifted while two older women, one possibly her great-aunt, the other possibly a tree, gently begin combing her hair with long, slow strokes. You think, this is tender? Ritualistic? Slightly horrifying? Yes to all three. The combing is done with extreme care, not because she's particularly tangled, but because every stroke is accompanied by a chant. The chant has no melody, but it carries weight, spoken in a sing-song rhythm. Comb the past, the childhood gone. Comb the doubt, till morning dawn. Comb the fear of flame and fight. Comb her into bridal light. It's beautiful. Chilling. Slightly itchy. The point of the ritual is not actual delousing, though in some centuries, that was certainly an added bonus, but symbolic cleansing. By combing out her hair before witnesses, the bride is stripped of her maiden self, her former fears, and her past loyalties. She enters the union fresh, reborn. And, ideally, flee free. Some historians insist this ritual had practical health purposes, lice being a very real part of medieval life. Others believe it's purely metaphorical, a way of detangling a woman from her old identity. Scholars still debate whether grooms ever underwent the same ritual. Spoiler, they didn't. Apparently, fleas were gender-biased. The sheet is draped around her shoulders as the final comb is passed, then folded and handed to the bride's mother with a solemn nod. That sheet will be kept, some say, in a cedar box, to be brought out if the bride ever feels lost or weary, her symbol of beginning anew. And then, in a bizarre plot twist, the groom is brought forward. No combing for him, just a ceremonial dunk of his hands into a basin of cold water scented with rosemary and vinegar. He grimaces. Someone says, that'll remind him to listen. This next part is worse. Or better. It depends on your perspective. Because the couple must now present their clean tokens. Yes. Tokens of cleanliness. These are small, odd items given to them by friends or family, tiny bars of soap, pouches of dried herbs, even a bundle of mint-scented rags. Each guest has written a clean vow to accompany their gift. The couple must read them aloud, alternating voices. The bride begins, I vow to scrub our hearth with joy, even if you track in mud. The groom follows, I vow to bathe twice a month. Or at least once. No less than that. Laughter breaks through the solemn air. A man shouts, he's already a better man than my son-in-law. You read one of the tokens as it's passed around, may your sheets be fresh, and your intentions fresher. You love it. Then comes the smelling rite. A small fire pot is lit, into which guests toss fragrant things, lavender, mint, crushed rose petals, dried apple peels. The mixture is stirred with a carved spoon said to belong to the bride's great-grandmother, or someone's great-grandmother, no one's sure anymore. The couple must lean over the pot together and inhale deeply. If they cough, bad luck. If they sneeze together, excellent fortune. If only one sneezes, well, someone's lying about something. They lean. They sniff. And, perfectly timed, both sneeze. The crowd erupts into applause. One guest throws a sock into the air. No one stops them. And just when you think it's over, the final lice benediction is spoken. Let no pest follow you. Let no rot dwell with you. Let your days be sweet as your scalp is clean. You snort into your wine. Someone hears. They give you a knowing wink. Because for all the absurdity, this is medieval sincerity in its purest form. They don't bless you with gold. Or with prayers for fame. They bless your scalp. Your bathwater. Your bed linen. Why? Because these were the true luxuries. In a world where most bathed seasonally, where bedding might house entire civilizations, and where perfumes were made of fermented herbs and desperation, cleanliness was divine. You lean back, savoring the fire smoke and dried apple scent in the air. And you realize that while modern weddings may give you Instagram hashtags and choreographed first dances, they almost never offer the profound comfort of someone praying that your marriage be as peaceful as your pillowcase is pest-free. It's strange. It's itchy. It's absolutely unforgettable. You've reached the sleepy, glowing edge of the night, where even the rowdiest guests have softened, where laughter fades into murmurs and goblets sit forgotten beside half-melted candles. You think, surely, it must be over. But no. The torches are relit, taller flames now, flickering gold and orange, and someone begins to hum a low, pulsing note that seems to rise from the very earth. The room quiets. The elder returns once more, her shadow dancing along the walls, and says simply, "The trial begins." Wait. Trial? Yes, the midnight trial, a wedding rite not of dance, nor feast, but of firelight, riddles, and theatrical reenactments. It's both blessing and performance. A symbolic testing of the couple's unity, designed to reveal the cracks before the first rooster crows. You scoot your stool a little closer. You're not missing this. First comes the circle of witnesses. A handful of guests, usually older, usually mischievous, step forward to serve as the jury. They sit in a half-moon arrangement around the hearth, wearing slightly crooked crowns of dried wheat and looking entirely too excited. They have titles like Judge of Forgetfulness and Squire of Spoons. Then the groom is led in. Barefoot. Holding a candle. The bride enters behind him, also barefoot, but dragging a small branch of holly behind her like a bouquet with opinions. The candle's light flickers between them as they kneel. A voice booms from the jury bench, "You have chosen each other in daylight. Now choose again, here in flame and shadow." The first trial is the riddle exchange. The groom is handed a scroll. He reads. "I turn without moving, I hold without touching, I break without sound. What am I?" The bride thinks, squints at the fire, then smiles, "A heart." Correct. She reads one to him, "You have me today, I'll be gone by night. I show your path, but give no light." He answers, "Your word." A pause. A grin. Someone in the jury wipes away a tear and mutters, "That one was new." Then comes the staged quarrel. This is a test of humor. The couple must fake an argument, over a ridiculous topic, while the crowd judges how well they disagree. Tonight's prompt is, who gets to name the pig? The groom insists the pig should be named after his father, an honorable tradition. The bride claims it should be called Pickles, because it looks like one and because pigs don't understand legacy. He fires back with something about bloodlines. She counters with, "Your father once fell in a ditch trying to milk a cat. We're naming the pig Pickles." The jury applauds. She wins, someone declares. The couple bows. The crowd laughs, but it's warm laughter. These aren't games to humiliate. They're playful rites, designed to show how a couple reasons together, fails together, and, most importantly, forgives together. The next test is the torch vow. A tall candle is lit between them, held in a shared iron stand. They must speak their hopes to the flame, one line each, until the candle gutter flashes in agreement. The groom begins, "May your tears fall into my hands, not onto my pillow." The bride, "May your silence be shared, not shut." Him, "May our tempers cool faster than our tea." Her, "May I always know where you placed the knife." Laughter again, but soft. The candle flickers once, twice, then blazes brighter. The crowd lets out a gentle breath. The flame accepts. You feel that warmth in your chest. It's not just the fire. And now, the final trial, the walk between lights. 2 lines of torches are held aloft by guests, forming a narrow aisle. The couple must walk through slowly, without breaking contact, hand in hand, eyes forward, even as the guests whisper fears into the dark. It's said to symbolize the passage into shared vulnerability. The lights flicker like all the things that might try to pull them apart. You hear the whispers as they walk. What if the harvest fails? What if he forgets your name when he dreams? What if she stops laughing? What if you miss the moment you were supposed to remember? The couple walks steadily. She squeezes his hand. He smiles without looking away. They make it to the end. A cheer rises, not wild, not loud, but full of relief. The jury declares, they are proven. A bell chimes. A child yawns into someone's cloak. A dog groans from under the bench. It's done. The torch aisle is extinguished. The scrolls are tied and tucked away. The couple kneels once more by the hearth, and the elder anoints their foreheads with ash and rosewater. You've passed through laughter, she says. You've passed through fire. Now pass into rest. The crowd claps, not with thunder, but with rhythm. A slow, tired beat. It echoes like a heartbeat. A promise. You sit still, watching the fire fade to embers, listening to the sighs of a village that just witnessed not a party, but a passage. A ritual that acknowledged not just love, but what comes after, the messy middle. The late nights. The questions. The quarrels over pigs. You smile. Because if two people can bicker over imaginary livestock in front of everyone they know and still want to hold hands through firelight, they'll probably be just fine. The fire has dwindled now to nothing but soft orange embers. Most of the guests are wrapped in cloaks or curled on benches, the air thick with sleep and the lingering scent of rosemary, mead, and spiced smoke. You stretch your legs beneath the table, wondering if anyone will notice if you fashion a pillow out of a roasted leek. But just as you begin to drift, a final bell sounds, delicate, silver, just one clear note, and the elder stands once more. No theatrics this time. No riddles, no feathers, no fox in a gown. Just the final rite. The last toast. The couple is seated at the center again, hair mussed, eyes glowing from a mix of exhaustion and pride. The guests gather loosely around them, some upright, some half asleep, all listening. The elder raises a goblet. Not golden or ornate, just wood, well used, stained with time. She speaks. To the end of feast and the beginning of firelight. To full bellies and unfinished chores. To promises that don't rhyme. And love that outlasts the wine. She drinks. The goblet is passed to the couple. Then to the families. Then around the circle, each guest taking just a sip, whether from the goblet itself or their own cup. It's a final communion. A gentle sealing. Now a soft, creaky voice breaks into song. An old man, toothless, wearing a velvet cape several decades out of style, begins to hum a lullaby. Others join in, quietly, sleepily, until the room is filled with the kind of song you don't really sing so much as remember. The lyrics make little sense. Something about a star who married a plum, a horse who dreamed of bread, a moon that forgot its name, but it's soothing, like warm broth for your ears. And beneath the song, unnoticed at first, the cake vanishes. Yes, the wedding cake, such as it was, has been spirited away. Not by servants or sneaky children, but by tradition itself. You ask the woman beside you, and she nods, it's supposed to disappear. If the couple wakes tomorrow and cannot find it, the marriage will be long and lucky. And if they do find it? She shrugs. It's breakfast. The disappearance is symbolic. The cake, often made days ahead, dried fruit packed into honeyed layers, is hidden by someone close to the couple. It's a playful omen. If it stays hidden, so too shall their troubles. If it's found too quickly, well, they're clearly good at hunting and communicating. So that's a win, too. You feel your eyelids grow heavy. The last toast has settled. The song drifts now like smoke above heads bowed with wine and warmth. The bride and groom are gone now, escorted to rest beneath embroidered quilts and the crinkled cabbage blessings of earlier. Guests begin to peel away, some to nearby cottages, others to the straw-strewn edge of the barn floor. You remain, just a bit longer, watching the last candle flicker. Because this isn't just the end of a wedding. This is the end of a transformation. From single to wed. From separate to woven. From two to one roof, one fire, one truly unsettling marzipan fox. You stand, quietly, and stretch the stiffness from your legs. Someone hands you a slice of leftover turnip tart wrapped in cloth. You nod your thanks. The last lute strum fades into silence. And as you step outside into the cool, starlit dark, the scent of hearth smoke still clinging to your sleeves, you think. You've seen something old tonight. Older than paper rings, than white dresses, than dances with dads and first looks. You've seen a wedding bound in mud and garlic, in riddles and roast birds, in laughter and awkward sincerity. And you know what? You'd go through it all again. Even the part with the lice comb. And now, you lie back, maybe in your own bed, maybe just in your mind, wrapped not in woolen cloaks or herb smoke, but in the soft hush of night. Let your thoughts drift, slow and syrupy, through flickering torchlight and ancient songs sung off-key. Let the images blur gently at the edges, a goat asleep beneath a table, a bride giggling behind a curtain of rosemary, a man drinking solemnly from a shoe. Let it all go quiet. That strange, wonderful feast was more than food and foolishness. It was a kind of shared dreaming, a village folding two lives together like pastry over spiced meat. Messy. Tender. Unexpected. Now, as your breathing slows and your muscles soften, you can still hear the fading echo of that last toast. You can still smell the cedar smoke and the faint, earthy spice of leeks. You can still feel the warmth of laughter layered over meaning, ancient and human and oddly sacred. Rest now, knowing that love, real love, isn't made of roses and silk. It's built from mud, from music, from mismatched spoons and shared stories. From dancing badly and staying anyway. Let the embers in your imagination burn low. Let the flicker of candlelight behind your eyes fade to shadow. Let the animals sleep, the bread rise, the cabbage sit quietly in its embroidered wrapping. And if you dream tonight, maybe it'll be of a riddle whispered in firelight, or a fox in a velvet dress who blesses your pillow. Sleep deep. Sleep soft. You've been to a wedding older than memory. And now, you carry a little of that magic with you. Sweet dreams.